Should be recording. Okay. So 3, 2, 1. And welcome to the Kid Ministry Collective podcast. And our goal here is at KMC is to equip, encourage, and entertain the kids ministry community. And my name is Tom Bump, and I'm one of the hosts on this episode of the KMC podcast. With me today is Dave Truitt and Phillip Sexton. Phillip, how you doing down there?
Hey, Tom, I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Phillip, give a quick introduction of where you're serving and what you're doing.
Yeah, sure, Tom. My name's Phillip Sexton. I'm the children's pastor here in Goldsboro, North Carolina, at an awesome church called Bethel Church. And we are jumping right on board with Easter starting tonight, so we're definitely excited about this weekend. But that's where I'm at.
Awesome. And Dave Truitt, tell us where you're at and serving.
Yeah, I am in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, which is the central part of Pennsylvania near Harrisburg. I'm a children's pastor here, and just greatly enjoy being here. I've been here, a little over 12 years now. So.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you guys, and thanks for joining me on today's podcast, and we're looking forward to a fun program. We've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about around our virtual round table, as we like to say on the KMC. And so today's episode, we're going to hit a couple different topics. We're going to talk about volunteering and recruiting. We're going to talk about leading ourselves, and we're also going to talk about keeping in balance, and then we'll top it off with some apps for staying organized or apps for ministry. And so should be a great episode, and we're looking forward to it. So let's just dive in, guys. Talk about volunteers, because I know, looking around the kid ministry community, I'm sure you guys are pretty well plugged in as well. You know that the number one topic seems to be, how do I get more volunteers? Why can't I get more volunteers? I'm scared to get volunteers. What are volunteers? You know, you could go to pretty much every conference, and I gotta believe. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I've got to think at least a quarter to almost half of the workshops are on volunteers, and so it seems like this is a struggle for most churches. So I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are on why do you. Let's start off here. Well, why do you think it's such a struggle for us in children's ministry getting volunteers? Phillip, let's start with you. What are some of your thoughts on volunteers?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Tom. Every time you go to a children's pastors conference or any kind of children's ministry conference, that's the question. Everybody wants to know, how do you get more volunteers? How do you retain your volunteers? And sometimes I really don't think that it is as big of a problem as we want to make it out to be sometimes. Although we all can always use volunteers, I don't think I've ever been to the point where I've had to turn away any volunteers, and probably 98% of our children's ministry workers would say that at that point. I mean, you always want to have a big surplus of volunteers as well. But I don't think anybody's ever got to the point where you didn't need any volunteers. And so, with that being said, I think there's a point that there's a comfort level, there's a security level of having enough volunteers in your back pocket that you don't ever put yourself in a bind or anything like that. So I think some of that stress that we're feeling with volunteers is not as bad as what it probably really is. Although the other side of that coin is, I don't know why we can't find the volunteers that we want sometimes, just because everybody's so busy and everybody's doing the works and everybody's volunteering. So sometimes it just, it's hard to keep those volunteers, especially with everyday life. The trend now is, at least in this area, is 2 times a week or 2 times a month of attending church, and you're a regular. Where when I was growing up, if you weren't in the church every single time the doors were open, then you weren't faithful. You weren't committed. So I think it's just culture has hurt us a little bit. So I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I think, one of the big things is just even when we use that word volunteer, I mean, it's a need, but the word volunteer itself, I mean, if we say volunteer to kids, kids will jump at the chance to volunteer to be up front, to do this or that, but adults don't really like that word, but yet we still use that word so frequently. I'm just looking for volunteers. I need some volunteers for this or that. I remember at last year's CM Connect conference, I think it was one of the Australians, I don't remember if it was Wakerly or somebody led a session, and just the terminology that we use and how that conveys something. So we started taking the volunteer out of what we're doing and trying to use words like team member or coach or something that connotates something other than volunteer. It gives them a little ownership. And we're at a point where we were a couple years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where we had more than enough volunteers. As a matter of fact, we were almost turning people away. But then we just kind of relied on them and didn't keep recruiting. And now we're at the place where all of a sudden we're like, where did everyone go? And a lot of them just moved up to youth ministry as their kids moved up, or as the group that they were leading moved up and things. So this past year, we are at a place where we really have been searching for that volunteer or that team member and things. So one of the things I learned is that big ask is important. Really setting the expectations high, and saying, okay, this is what I need. If you're a small group leader, I need you there every week, unless you're sick or on vacation. It's a big commitment, but that's what we need. And it's been refreshing to see the people say no to it, and no is a great answer, or yes to it. And just when we've raised that bar of expectation, we've gotten, lack of a better word, better quality people, or people who are more committed to that task, that job, that ministry. So we're really trying to change what we're doing. Everyone's got a role, and it's not a volunteer role, but it's a ministry role. Whether you're an actor, whether you're a sound tech, whether you are roaming the halls, security, you are in ministry in that area. So, but that word volunteer, we all need them, and it is an important thing that a lot of people struggle with, and we're no exception.
Yeah, Dave, you said a couple things that that made me think about. Number one is that we have also started using the word team. Okay. All of our volunteers are team members, and two is raising that level of
Oh, I lost him. Did you lose him, Tom?
Yeah, I did lose him there.
I think what he was saying.
Exactly.
There he is, coming back. We lost you there for a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I was just saying that all of my volunteers have a job description and a performance agreement, and that basically just allows them to know what's expected out of them and what their job is. And by doing that, they know exactly what I'm expecting from them each and every time they serve, and there are no questions. And they also can hold themselves accountable if they're not doing what they've been asked to do as well. So, of course, that's the negative side of it, but we usually don't have to address that because they know what they're supposed to do.
So for both of you guys, one of the things that I heard both of you really say, I mean, and Dave, I love the idea that you said, to change up the terms, your terminology. I think that's really, really good. And that's something we've started to do here a little bit more, is using that word team, and not volunteer. The thing I heard from both of you guys that I think would be a tip that any listener to the KMC podcast here is that having real clear expectations. It sounds like both of you guys have pretty clear expectations and job descriptions, that kind of thing, so that when you're making that ask and you're asking for that commitment to join the team, it sounds like both of you guys lay down real clear expectations. Can you guys tell me, Dave, what's your process when you start asking somebody? What kind of a process? Tell us about the journey. If I walked up to you and said, "Hey, Pastor Dave, I want to join your kids' ministry today. What do I have to do?" What's your process for moving somebody onto your team?
Well, one of the first things is obviously going through all of the child protection stuff and all that. But after we get through all those formalities and things, the big part is just finding what they want to do. And having you, Tom, if you would come to me and say, "Hey, you're interested in this," I'd say, "Great, let's give it a whirl. Let's give it a try." And try to find a spot where you could be assisting or watching or be a small part of things. Like if you want to be an actor, I'm not going to sign you up to be one of our main character actors right away. I want to see what it's like, give you a chance to see what it's like, give both of us a way that you can easily say, "Oh, I thought that would work, but it doesn't really work." So kind of that trial period, and give it the honest feedback. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, and not just for those who are coming just to start out, but those who have been a small group leader for years or an actor for years or whatever, is giving that honest feedback and saying, "You know what, this didn't really meet the expectations of what we were doing, and we need to change things up." Or we in ministry, at least my experience in ministry, and the default for me is to, well, they're just volunteering. They don't have to get it right all the time or things like that. But the people that we've challenged and called to the table on things about being late all the time, or wanting to increase their acting ability or their teaching ability by giving them some resources or some training, it's just really made them feel more a part of the team and have more responsibility, and just really made it better all around, as far as for them not just feeling like they're filling a role, but they're really contributing when they're getting honest feedback about the goods that they've been doing, and some of the bad things that have been happening. So that honest feedback, I think, is really critical, and I think that's something that we don't do a whole lot of in the church for volunteers.
Yeah. I want to come back to that in a second, but Phillip, I want to hear from you real quick. What's your process? How do you take somebody when they say, "Hey, I want to join up"? What do you do?
Yeah, Tom, so we are very much like Dave. Once we get through the child protection stuff, I sit down and schedule an orientation or interview with the possible volunteer, and we go through all of our ministry handbooks. We go through the jobs, the availabilities. At that time, I'm trying to gain as much information from that person as possible, just to kind of get an idea of where they're coming from, why they're volunteering, what makes them so interested. Once we do that, I kind of fill them out where we think that they would fit the best at. Sometimes it is where they want to go. Sometimes I suggest another place. And we put them in that spot in kind of like a shadowing capacity, where they're just kind of hanging out and seeing what's going on the first several times and getting their hands wet, so to speak, and then we'll go back and kind of, that's where we pick up right into what Dave was saying. Then we'll just kind of talk to each other, see if it's fitting for them. If they think, "Hey, I thought the nursery was going to be all fun and I didn't expect the dirty diapers, so now I really don't like those things, and so maybe I want to do something with a little bit older kids." And so we make it easy for them to get out, because definitely we don't want them in there if that's not where they want to be and not where they desire to be. So it's very similar. And then we do a 1 month checkup, we do a 3 month checkup, and then a 6 month checkup, which kind of renews their commitment at the same time. So
Okay. So yeah, and I think I will say my processes are pretty similar. So I'm not going to add a whole lot different than what you guys have, but I am curious, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. One of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is that feedback, or those situations where, and yeah, we're going to go there. You have somebody that comes and they're all gung-ho about, "I want to serve in this specific area." And so they've already targeted, "I want to do this." but yet you kind of, as a pastor, you kind of know their reputation. You know they may not be the greatest fit there. I'm curious because this is one of those conversations that all of us want to avoid a lot. Is that that they're not a good fit, or they have a reputation maybe for quitting after just a couple of weeks because the excitement level has worn off, or whatever. I'm curious, how do you guys handle, and maybe you could tell us about a scenario where you've had to do this, where you've had to replace or move somebody. Um, I'm thankful that gone are the days of, hey, you got a pulse, come on in and join kids ministry. I think most kids ministry leaders nowadays know that's not the way to recruit. The general all-out plea to the whole congregation is not. It's better to shoulder tap. We'll talk about some specifics recruiting things, but I'm just curious, what do you guys do though if you have somebody come up to you and you just kind of know that's not going to be a good fit? Your heart's guts telling you that's not going to be a good fit. I'm not sure who wants to go first, so I'll throw it open.
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, and that's where, if you are evaluating everybody's ministry, if you're evaluating everybody, it becomes easier because it's not like you're just singling them out and, okay, it's time to evaluate you, and I don't like what you're doing. So if you're evaluating everybody, then it becomes easier when you're evaluating them, that part of it. I've had two things that I could think of. I mean, there's more than that, but two. One, she was an awesome teacher for preschool. I mean, she gave it her all. She did wonderful things, but she was not a team player. And she was a creative person who had wonderful ideas, but they were always last-minute ideas and last-minute things. And they didn't necessarily go with what we were thinking about doing that week or that month or that theme. And it was tough to remove her in some ways because she was so great. But just by meeting with her and talking about, okay, you have wonderful ideas, let's get you, behind the program so we can strategize why we're teaching what we're teaching. She came to realize that while she had good ideas, it wasn't, a part of the big plan overall. And, we changed her roles. And she was kind of more of a decorator and doing things like that, and did wonderful. But she was stung a little bit that through it, but yet she also was able to realize how she wasn't really meeting the needs of the team and the ministry and the role that she was in. Another lady came from another church, and I did follow up with that church. And they gave me some warning flags about not completing projects and some things like that. And she wanted to reorganize our resource closet, which is always something that needs done. But just hearing some of the things that she, didn't finish well over there, I just had to keep telling her we appreciate it, but we're not ready to do that at this time because we're not sure about how we want it to be. And things like that. So she had a tough time hearing it, but just that we weren't able to use what she was willing to give, because it would have, on my end, it would have cost us more in energy and frustration and things like that than what would have happened if she would have been able to organize it and things.
Yep.
So
I think sometimes out of the niceness of our personalities, that we often sacrifice what's best for the ministry sometimes to accommodate a volunteer. And so that sounds like a wise way of handling it, because you wouldn't want her to clear out the resource closet only to quit and everything's out in the hallway. So
right.
So Phillip, what kind of scenario have you seen, and what are your thoughts on dealing with that volunteer or the team member that wants to join, but you just are kind of like, boy, I'm not sure they're ready yet to be in that spot?
Yeah, well, I've ran across some that have honestly surprised me. where I thought, hey, I don't think that's going to work, but we'll give them a little shot, and they honestly had done 10 times better than I thought they would. So I guess I would say that if they're dead set on something and I have no red flags that would make me automatically just say no, then I will just give them a shot. But I will ease them into it, and also just be flat out honest with them if they're failing or if they're not doing good, so that we can move them along and not sacrifice the excellence, and not sacrifice the ministry, or somebody, or things just not being done with the excellence. So I think with my personality is I used to kind of go along with it for a while, and I probably used to sacrifice a little bit just because I didn't want to hurt people's feelings. But as I've gotten older and into leadership more and more, I've learned to just be more honest and open, and sometimes it doesn't go over as well as you want it to. But most of the time, I've seen that people kind of just they receive it well, and we can move them somewhere else, so that we can kind of just keep everything rolling. So
Cool. Yeah, I know. Leading volunteers can be, a team member leading a team. Like I'm even slipping back. Leading a team sometimes can be tough, but I think we've got to be bold enough to have those hard conversations. It's getting the right people. Like I think it's Jim Collins always says, the right people on the right seat on the bus, and it really does help everybody move together. I think my only contribution to this discussion, and then we'll move on to the next segment, is I think that is critical, and I think finding people where they're gifted, and I think explaining to an applicant right up front. And I think each of you guys said this, you do this, where you kind of really giving people test runs, giving people that way out, giving them the ability to say, this isn't really a good fit for me. This isn't my gifting. One of the things I stress with our team here in Cleveland is that we really do, because we care about you and we want you to love what you're doing. We want to make sure this is the right spot for you. And so, that's why we always tell them, you've got a 2 to 3 week test drive, test it out, kick the tires, hang out with us, give us feedback, what you like, what you don't like, how you're feeling. We give them little bits and pieces to do, so that they get to try themselves out, but then that gives us a way to evaluate. We always ask our other team members, to give us feedback on that prospect. And so far, I think if you do some of those kind of things, it will make looking for team members a lot less painful. And then if you have to move somebody, I think that makes it, a lot better. And so being that kind of leader, being bold and stuff, I think is super important. So I think those are some critical things. I think that's, a good portion of why a lot of people struggle, is they're scared to make that big ask. They're not making clear expectations. They don't really have a clear process of how to move somebody from an application to being an official team member, and then they struggle with that right fit. And so, good segment, guys. I think that was some good stuff. Good advice, I think, for people.
I think, Tom, one of the things is just keeping your whole volunteer tier really organized would be a good way to sum it up. If you're organized and you have a way to move people here and there, and you have thoughts and processes in place in order to do that. And so, since we are moving on, and speaking of organization, let me throw this out there. We've all got smartphones now, so what are some of the apps that you guys use in order to stay organized? Whether it's organizing your ministry, organizing your personal life, or what else? What kind of apps do you use? What kind of things do you do personally that help you stay organized? Dave, you want to start us off?
Sure. That's kind of a loaded question. There's so many apps out there, like you said, so many different things. As far as organizing our material that we're teaching and things like that, we use a combination of, things like Dropbox, It's probably one of the biggest things that we use, just as far as lessons out there, so everybody has access to them. All the teachers, the leaders, and things like that. Personally, how I stay organized, it's a hodgepodge. I wish it was somewhat better. I use Evernote a lot. Anything that I want to keep, it just goes right into Evernote. I throw it all there. I love that app, but that is more of my storage vault. I don't use it a whole lot for day-to-day things, but it's more for anything I want to keep. I just put in Evernote, and then it's an easy way to find material for me. I think I've tried almost everything out there. I don't know how many hundreds of dollars I've spent on apps or programs or things like that. Way too much. But I keep coming back to some of the basic stuff. I'm an Apple guy, and just the basic notes and a to-do list. That's kind of my default. Matter of fact, the notes for this that was sent to me, I threw in in the Apple Notes program, because I'm able to access it easily through all my devices, iPad, phone, on the computer, and things like that. So that is probably my default thing, where I just throw everything in. But I've tried everything like OmniFocus, to-do apps, there's so many out there that are wonderful, but none of them clicked with me as far as getting things. But for me to stay on top of things, just the default apps have what's really worked for me. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think for me, I use Dropbox and Evernote a lot. Haven't used Apple Notes as much. I mean, I do for random things, I guess. So I'm gonna have to maybe look at that a little bit more. I haven't played with that. I've heard several other podcasts, people talking about how Apple Notes has improved recently. So I may have to dive into that more. I just kind of use that for reminders of a few things. My license plate number or whatever. The little things like that. Even though it could be an Evernote too, I do put stuff like that in Apple Notes. But for me, staying organized, I started out trying Wunderlist, and I liked that for a while as a to-do kind of thing. But I ended up going to Todoist, and Todoist seems to be the one that I've been tracking with lately. And I'm one of those personalities that, I like you, Dave. I will try everything and anything, because it's new and somebody says something on a blog about it. I'm gonna go try that one. But I was cautioned by a friend of mine who said, look, because of your personality, you are going to do that. You need to find something and stick with it. Right. And so I have made a vow to, no matter what else comes out, I'm sticking with Todoist. The only thing I don't like about it, it doesn't have, unfortunately, my church uses Outlook for our mail and stuff like that, and unfortunately right now Todoist still doesn't have a link to work together. So that's kind of hinky when you can't throw your emails into it. But it really, it works on all my platform. I'm an Apple guy too, Dave. So I'm right there with you. So I can go on my iPad or on my MacBook or on my phone and hit the app and go. So the Todoist and my calendars, I use a calendar a lot. That keeps me going. I'm trying to learn to work backwards all the time with events. That if I have an event scheduled for, like we have our Fam Jam, which is our family VBS that we're doing this summer. It's June 7th, 8th, and 9th. I'm working backwards from that, and so I've got dates in my calendar, and those go on my Todoist app. And so everything runs in there, but I've bounced back between Google Calendar, Apple's Calendar, and then our church uses another app. I think it was called Calendar Mob. Now it's called Little Calendar, something like that. But we've kind of used that to coordinate all of our calendars, but it pretty much all goes through Google Calendar. So I tend to use that, and I'm just now starting to explore Planning Center. And I think, Phillip, you can tell us a little bit more. I know you use it for your check-ins, but our worship team uses it, but I'm starting to look at it for our team, our volunteer team, with putting up the curriculum and scheduling and all of that. I think that would be a huge one once we can figure out how to actively use it. So, Phillip, what are you using?
Well, since you mentioned Planning Center, we do use Planning Center a lot around here. They have a check-in app as well, so we use it for check-in. As far as getting our curriculum to each of our volunteers, I download all of our curriculum on the Planning Center so that they can use that, and it's available to them when they get assigned to be on when they're on schedule for that weekend or whatever. So we do use Planning Center a lot. I am an Apple guy as well, and I do have the same personality as you guys. I like to try everything that comes out as soon as it comes out. I want to be the first one to say I've done it, but have hurt myself in the process because half the time it doesn't turn out to be as nice as it seemed when I was seeing the advertisement. So I always resort back to my notes. I do use notes a lot as well. Probably use notes more now than I did, say, a year ago. I don't use Evernote. I have tried it, but I think Notes is what I kind of resort back to as far as most of that stuff. As far as a to-do calendar, Tom, I'm right there with you on Todoist. Once I was introduced to Todoist, I kind of fell in love with that app, so that's kind of my to-do app. And even though I am an Apple guy, I do not prefer iCal. I'm a Google Calendar guy, only because we run all of our church calendars through Google Calendar. So if you were to look at my I have an app called Calendars Plus on my phone, which is I pull my Google Calendars into that, and I seem to like that app. It cost probably $5 or $6 when I got it, but I probably have 22 Google Calendars on my phone just because we have a calendar at our church for each ministry. We have a facilities calendar. We have a van transportation calendar. So we put everything on those calendars, and then we share them with all the staff. So at any time, if we go to schedule an event for our ministry, then we can see that a van's already being used, or a building's already being used for another ministry, or there's another event that would coincide with that one that we might not want to overlap. And so we use Google Calendars has been probably the solution to all that. Plus, I put everything personal in it. My wife and I share a personal calendar, so if I had to see something that's coming up that she's planned, such as a dinner with somebody at our house, I know not to schedule a counseling session during that time or something like that. So calendars has been one of my downfalls in my life, but because I've kind of just went by the whim. But probably in the past 3 years. More so this past year and a half, probably because of Infuse and Brother Jim Wyman, but I have definitely, my life actually revolves around my calendar, which has been probably my most organized app that I have, and everything kind of flows with it as well. So there are a couple little other here and there's. I use reminders and a lot as well, so those keep me going.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many out there, and kind of like what you guys were saying, finding what works for you. And Tom, I agree with what you said. You sometimes just got to stick with one thing for a long period of time to really find out if you like it or not.
It's hard, isn't it? It really is.
It's hard, but you got to do
There's so much fun out there that it really becomes a challenge.
Yep.
Because, like I said, if you like listening to podcasts, if you like reading blogs, somebody's always telling you about some new and improved thing that's going to help you stay organized, and then you grab onto it.
But the funny thing is, you always come back to the basics.
That's
sometimes you do. Yep.
Dave spoke truth there.
Now here's a question for you guys. How do you use those to stay on top of leading yourself? I mean, are you putting things in your calendar as far as quiet time, time away, things like that? We all know how busy ministry is, and I mean, we're in a situation here at our church where we have 2 services. So I should be able to get away for at least part of one service and be in the adult service. Notice I said adult service, not the main service, because I believe the main service is with the kids. I try real hard not to use the word main service for the adult service. Anyway, but how are you guys using that technology, or what are you guys doing to feed yourselves to make sure that you are leading yourself well, preventing burnout, things like that? Tom, why don't we go ahead and start with you? What are some things that you do, whether it's using technology or not, to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think scheduling is important. If you don't put it on your calendar, it's not going to get done. And so I do set up a reminder. You shouldn't need reminding to have your devotions and prayer time, but I like setting that safeguard up. It prevents me from running through my day without stopping. So I have at 7:14 in the morning, my alarm pops up with a question that just says, "Have you had your God time today?" And that's a good reminder for me. Yeah, I think using this technology, whether it be just a paper reminder calendar, the day timer. There we go. I was searching for the name. It's been so long since I've used one. But a day timer or just a flat out wall calendar or whatever. I think if you're not intentional, you're going to find yourself in trouble. And I found myself that way. So I'm speaking from past experience where I didn't do that. And I was allowing everything and anything to come on and get in my calendar, where I'm a lot more discerning. I think now I'm I guess wiser with age. I hope.
And you are old, so.
Oh yes, I am. Oh, creak. And so I think learning how to lead myself means that I need to scheduling that time away, taking breaks, both with my wife and my family. Even though my kids are older now, young adults really, we still try to make sure we plan intentional family time together. Time where we're off the computers, off the thing. I don't know if you guys saw recently, but I thought Chick-fil-A hit a grand slam, and I'm already like, why didn't I think of this? But
Right.
we're gonna make something for our family VBS this year. We're gonna give families a box to put their technology in during the meals. I thought that was brilliant.
Yep.
Kudos to Chick-fil-A. Besides their good chicken. That box idea of just everybody put it in during meal times and let's talk, I think it's huge because, I mean, as a leader, we need that time. My family keeps me grounded, and and once it's on the calendar, one of the things I found, I came up against this year was I had planned out my family vacations, and then in staff meeting found out that a family missions trip that I'm usually a part of, we somehow got the wrong week on the church calendar, and I had already booked my family vacation, and it turns out that the family missions trip is on the week of my vacation. And I will confess, I immediately thought, oh boy, I better change my vacation, but then went, no, it's on the calendar already and I can't change it. And so I went to my pastor and said, hey, I'm sorry this happened, but somebody else is going to have to go on this trip because my family and I are going to be on vacation that week. And the cool part is he supported that and didn't even think about asking me to change. I think having those kind of, conviction, I guess I'll call it, helps me lead myself, making sure that I'm spending time in the Word and in prayer for my own benefit, taking time away to rest with my family, and I think those kind of things, technology can help you, but if you're spending so much time on technology, I think it hurts you ultimately. So I think those are a couple things that I do. I put it on the calendar, I stick to it. It's only in extreme cases would I ever change to move that, because I don't want to send the wrong message to my church family that I can throw my family aside for the church. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Phillip?
Well, I will save you the repeating information from Tom because I think everything he said is exactly how I feel. I do put my time with God on my calendar. I also do make sure that I spend time with my family. We do have a rule around our table that when we do eat together at the table, that no electronics, no phones are allowed. And I have a 15-year-old, and he sometimes doesn't like that advice, but hey, we get through it. He does know how to talk as well as text every once in a while, but so we do get through that. One thing I will say that I will add to the things that Tom said that I really find very valuable to me is that I have a really good friend that's on staff here, and we allow each other to hold each other accountable.
Mm.
And so at random times we'll pass in the hall, and he'll go, "What was your devotion on today?" And then if I haven't been in the Word that day, then he got me, and it makes me go, and we've got each other before,
Mm-hmm.
so just allowing him to be able to do that. And we also have honest conversations where, hey, I think that you're not doing what you need to do, or I think I noticed you kind of shirking your family the other day when you probably had it, those kind of things. So being held accountable by a person is something that's really good because, and if it's somebody that will truly, be honest with you, which I think we all need that person, and we have to allow them to do that to us. But that really helps me because I think I could probably, just out of being human and being made of flesh, I could probably get around my calendar if I wanted to here or there. But it's hard to get around somebody that's actually, throwing something in your face and speaking to you in an honest way. So I think that's the one thing that I would just add to what Tom said.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely resonate with everything you guys said, and it's great to have that person who keeps you accountable. For me, there's somebody that lives many states away, lives in Colorado, but he's able to just kind of cut right to the core and just, hey, what you been studying? What are you doing with your personal time and things? For me personally, even when I go into our worship service, my mind's still going on, okay, what's happening in this wing, or what's happening with the children, or I got to remember this, or this person's not going to be there, so we got to move some things around next service. So I personally have trouble just being able to focus on worship and things at our church. Our worship's great, but my mind's going around so many other things. For me, thankfully, I do not mind. Matter of fact, I enjoy worshiping with some churches that put some things online. So Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, or Saturday night, if they're streaming it live, and I hop around to many different websites, churches, and things, and I find that refreshing, and that really rejuvenates me, just as far as me getting fed and everything. I listen to podcasts and all sorts of things, but just that worship experience. And I realize I am not worshiping with other people right then. It's usually just me with my headphones on. But there's many people in the online community that are also doing it. And I get something out of that. I really do. Also for me, it's important. Sunday morning, I try to get here early, 5:30 or so. And I spend time in my office. The tune's cranked up really loud. I want to make sure that I'm getting fed before I go and try to feed others. So I try to get, like a better word, get my worship on in the morning before many other people are here in the building, and just so that I am just ready to go that morning. Is there anything else that you guys do as far as the worship service? I mean, I'm going to CM Connect here next week, and I greatly enjoy conferences because that's when I could leave a lot of things behind and just really focus, in worship, if there's worship or things like that. But Tom, is there anything that you do as far as for worship or things?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think conferences are a good thing. 5:30 in the morning though, I'm like I don't know if I'm even saved at that hour. No. All right, that's a whole nother theological discussion. Never mind, we're not going on to that. I think for me, I'm one that I love being out in creation,
Hmm.
and um, but I two things for me is I do like you, Dave. I do worship with other places. I stream a lot of other services and listen to other pastors preaching, just again to feed my own. When I'm going to the gym and I'm on the elliptical, I either have a podcast or a message downloaded and ready to go, so that while I'm exercising, I can worship. While I'm there. Obviously, the conferences are great to worship, and hopefully, we can do a follow up episode on the CM conference. I really want to get some of you guys that are going down to that one. I hate to miss that this year, but a shout out to Michael Chanley and his gang for putting that on, and hopefully next year I can maybe we'll even do a live show down there. I don't know. That'd be fun. But I'll also give a shout out to my buddy Carl Bastian for the Yosemite Summit.
Hmm.
Because again, that's another way to take care of yourself, is just to get away completely and unplug.
Definitely.
I think that's an act of worship, is just unplugging and focusing. And one thing I love about Yosemite Summit, it's a hike for guys. It's a week out in Yosemite. No technology, you leave it behind really, and you just get out and you hike and you study your Bible and you worship God. You enjoy His creation, and that's why I said, for me, it's getting out and taking walks with my wife and the dog, and just enjoying, being outside and seeing our Creator and all the things He's created, and I'm worshiping. Scripture comes to mind, or a song comes to mind, and I think those things just breathe life to me. I love music, so I've always got music playing in my office in the background. I've got a select playlist that if I'm really trying to worship, this week I've had an Easter list of songs that just cause me to reflect on the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus, and so that's what I do. Philip, anything else that you do?
No, the conferences was a great idea. I do get refreshed at the conferences as well. And I mean, you guys hit it all. Honestly, I don't think I have anything else to add to it.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, this has been a good episode, and I think we've given people some good things to think about. And so, as we wrap up, we want to say again, thanks for listening to another episode of the KMC Kid Ministry Collective podcast. We're super excited that now we are on iTunes. So, if you're listening to us on iTunes, we hope that you will subscribe and please leave a review for us. The more people that do that, that moves us up the charts on iTunes, and our goal, like I said, is to equip and encourage and even entertain the kid ministry community, and we want to live up to our theme verse of Proverbs 27:17, that as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another, and that's what we want to do with this podcast. So again, thanks for listening. Philip, David, thanks for hanging out with me for a while today.
Yeah, thanks for having us,
You
Tom.
got it. Thanks.
And we'll look forward to another episode coming up soon of the KMC. Like I said, join us there. If you haven't joined us on the Facebook community, we'd love to have you be a part of our Facebook group. Or if you'd like to watch this as a video, there is a Kid Ministry Collective YouTube channel where you can even subscribe and actually see us recording this episode if you're really a glutton for punishment. I forgot when I was doing my shout out to Chick-fil-A to put out my Eat More Chicken cow, but oh well. That was pretty moving. Oh, that was bad. I better move on with the closing of this. So anyway, guys, thanks again for being honest. Again, if you want to connect up with Dave or Philip, you can hit them up. Guys, give us your contact info as we wrap up their episode today.
Well, I'll go first. It's _Pastor Phillip if you want to look me up on Twitter or Instagram, and Phillip with 2 L's .Sexton at BethelChurch.info if you want to send me an email.
Yeah, for me, the easiest probably just social media. Balloon Pastor is pretty much handled across many things, things like that, or balloonpastor@gmail.com.
All right, and you can find me on Twitter at PTBump, or ptbump.com is my blog and website. Has all sorts of information on how you can contact me. So again, thanks for listening, and or if you're watching, thanks for watching, and we'll have another episode coming up soon for the Kid Ministry Collective. So God bless. Have a great day. There we go.